All right. Hey, welcome back to the Go for CEO channel where we bring you CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs, and guess what? Today we're bringing you an intrapreneur. And I've been telling you about this, and we have a few videos on our channel, and you know that we love to bring you people just with great insights and power behind them. Today this gentleman is going to answer the call for you. All right, Mr. Steve Luckenbach. I met him at a seminar recently, had a great speaking engagement with the organization that he was speaking at, and I was blown away. I'm like, dude, I gotta have you on my YouTube channel, on my podcast. So welcome to the Go for CEO channel, Steve. How are you?
I'm well, John. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it was great
Awesome.
encountering you after the presentation. I was particularly fired up right off a stage, and so thank you for the invite.
Awesome, brother. Awesome. Well, look, off camera here, we were talking about how do we deliver to the channel, to the Go for CEO community, and I'm going to have you go dive right into it. Right, answer the call. We got yteamweekly.com. We got steveluckenbach.com. What is going on? What is the fire you have inside of your belly that, as an entrepreneur, you've been able to really do some dynamic things? Let's dive right into it.
I appreciate it, John. Yeah, as you and I were preparing for this time together, that answering the call from within. I think no matter where you find yourself, if you're entrenched in some corporate situation, you got this job that pays the bills. I think we all get called at some point, right? There's something that grabs us. If we have any kind of curiosity at all, we start to get a bit of dopamine when we get into these thoughts and areas of, hey, I think this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Hey, this is what I really enjoy. But a lot of people miss that call. A lot of people ignore the call because they feel like they got to quit what they're doing. They got to completely leave the corporate world that sort of, as I said, pays the bills, or maybe they like it so-so. But what I found over the course of my career, where there's a will, there's a way. I've been in the financial services industry for 35 years. I still am in the industry. I enjoy the work, but I just got a call to speak. I got the calling to write. I got the calling to author. My audiences would come up and say, when's your book coming out? And I'd be like, I'd laugh at first. And then they kept asking. And I was like, well, maybe there's supposed to be a book. And so it just sort of went from there. I wrote a weekly email to a lot of friends. They're like, hey, you ought to make it a blog. That happened about 6 years ago. And now we've got, a few thousand members. And so it's just to know that life's sort of calling you forth, and listening to that and answering the call is really rewarding. It's a lot of fun.
I love it. I love it. So look, a lot of times you get a seed planted in your brain, right? And like you said, you're not listening to the little guy, or gal talking to you on your shoulder, right? So what are some deep ways that someone can just take a step back, start to listen to that seed inside you, to that person? What are some exercises that you did, or did you go seek counsel from someone that you thought maybe was a little bit wiser in certain areas? How did you develop that?
Great question. First off, I'm a huge advocate of coaches. If you can get somebody in your life, one of my favorite lines is, you can't see the picture when you're in the frame. So getting somebody outside to look at you and kind of give you honest feedback. But I would say more than anything that's propelled me forward is reading. I just, as the saying goes, leaders are readers. And I love a great book, and I have a very curious mind. So I read on many different topics. And a more recent read that right now is The Art of Impossible by Stephen Kotler, The Art of Impossible. And out of that book, I came to the awareness just recently that the way the brain is a pattern recognizer. And so if you feed it good stuff, right? If you feed it curious, interesting, if you feed it, it will find the patterns. It will make patterns, in essence, creating new ideas, fresh ideas, because there's nobody else on earth like you. No one is reading the same books in the same order at the same time. And when your brain's making those connections, you do get that dopamine, that spice of life. And I think out of that, we start to get some callings, and we start to identify what we really love. And if we can answer that, it's hard for me to believe where it's taken me. I've spoken in over 700 cities in the last 17 years. And if you told that kid sitting on the couch, I got a picture of me at like 18 years old, looking through the classifieds, trying to find a job. If I could sort of transported myself back to that moment and said, "Hey, let me tell you what your future is going to be like," I would have been it's unbelievable if you can answer, feed that. But I would say reading at the top of the list.
Okay.
And then shifting one of the lines, one of the often shares RTP, to reap the possibilities, is an acronym. RTP, read, think, and partner. If we can fuel the thinking and expand the thinking, you never want to arrive. I like to say the know-it-all rarely learns it all. So if you can feed the thinking mind, if you can maintain a critical thinking mind, which means you become critical of your own thoughts, not critical of others, critical of your own thoughts. The expansion there is huge. Just to stay humble, that there's so much more to learn, so much more to know. And then P for partner, things like this podcast and getting coaches and mentors in your life, absolutely all day long. You encounter any human being in your life that feeds you, that energizes you, then get them in your calendar regularly. Say, "Hey man, can we meet weekly? Can we meet every couple of weeks?" And again, like this podcast, if you got a podcast that feeds the soul and feeds the spirit, it's not just our physical sustenance, it's our energetic, spiritual, mental sustenance that we need. And we need to attend to what's going in. So I'm a speaker. I joke that I'm not a very good listener. That's why I became a speaker. but go ahead, please.
No, I love it. And I think it's really intuitive, right? To have been reading this whole time, right? And giving yourself the knowledge. And then every once in a while you pluck out something that really kind of hits home, right? So one thing that, we talked about right at the beginning here is, you don't have to leave corporate America. You could be in your job, right? So what are some ways that you teach people and that you notice, all right, well, hey, I'm at this pretty big firm. We're building something special, but there's this little calling. So then what were maybe 2 or 3 steps that you took to start to develop that intrapreneur and kind of, some people call it side hustle, but it's really just that other passion that you may have?
Well, one of the ways you can test its strength is that you can do it simultaneously with the other job. Right? I mean, if it's truly calling you and it's strong enough, you'll start to make that time. But yeah, I mean, early in the morning, in the evening, I don't know what the structure of your current job is. Some people have a lot more freedom corporately, and so they have some time to step away and to record and think. If you've got your morning disciplines of training and working out, setting aside time to write, for example, and to contemplate. For me, I work out with a trainer. I've been working out with him for 17 years. I train with him a couple days a week. And I block out at least an hour of writing right after that workout as a discipline. I make space for that. I used to wait for the muse to show up and inspiration, but you can't always depend on that, So the discipline of okay, I'm going to write within this hour. And the beauty of it, right after workout, the dopamine's high. You're just really particularly fired up. I find it a great way to tap into spirit, if you will. I like that idea that inspiration is to be in spirit, right? To be inspired is to be in sort of that ethos of enthusiasm. Ethos meaning God, sort of that special place where you're particularly optimistic and fired up. So that's a great time to read and to write. But I can't stress that enough. I would say that definitely reading has done that. I want to give you one insight here as you were talking, and the reason I was saying reading and experiencing other people, read, think, and partner, is that I remember hearing years ago from a man he was the president of the Speaker Association. He was actually president of Toastmasters at one point, nationwide. And I said to him, I had these experiences where I had those sort of eureka moments, right? I had this sort of epiphany that would pop up. And then I would read like a book I'd already read a few years ago, and I would see that the epiphany was in there. I was like, okay, that's where it came. It actually came out from that book. It didn't just come out of nowhere. And he said that it's written in the ancient text that the Spirit brings to your remembrance, but it can't bring to your remembrance if it's not there. And so I think it's cool. I think it's important to circle back. A lot of people I find don't read a lot of books. They're like, there's no way I'm going to remember them all. Right. But what's interesting, it's like uploading data and having more available. And then with that spirit of serving, for example, I call it the spirit of serving as opposed to selling, for example, in business, will bring to your remembrance. It's like it will bring to that spirit brings to your remembrance. So I call it your individual achievement reservoir. It is constantly pouring into this reservoir from which you will pull. So, I'm never going to remember that. It's like, you're not going to consciously always remember it, but if you pour it in, if you have the discipline of pouring it in, and to answer your question, John, I think that's done in structure, that's done in process. When do you work out? What windows of opportunity can you make? Still do your day job, but work in some discipline formulas for building this other business that may be your future, right? The other business sort of peaks and falls or moves on. It's also a great backup plan, right? A plan B or a plan C, because you never know if you don't have complete control of your destiny, right? I think one of the reasons entrepreneurs love being entrepreneurs is they're their own boss, right? As opposed to working for someone else. But that working for somebody else can afford you to develop yourself as your own CEO. And it's about setting that time aside in advance, I think. Right?
Such huge nuggets, right? In Go for CEO community, you just heard a little tiny masterclass there, right? Of sharing with you, right? From reading to writing to then understanding how to really develop your plan and then put some time together, right? As an intrapreneur, I affectionately have called myself for many years when I do work for a corporation outside of my own businesses, right? I have really said to myself, all right, how do I plant the seed to be able to then keep on growing that internally and externally, right? So awesome stuff. So look, I'd love to dive into why Team Weekly and how you develop that and what it really means to the community that follows you, Steve. So let's dive into that side. What is it doing? How is it helping the community? And what else can we gain from being a part of that, weekly blog?
Thanks so much, John. Yes, it was. It's been very rewarding to see the evolution of this. Again, sort of answering back to the theme of answering the call. My speaking career really kicked off from a book titled Good to Great by Jim Collins. I started speaking professionally back in 2006. I was so inspired by this book. I was working for a company that really was experiencing this sort of good to great. It was happening in our profession. We were going from just being a regular company to being truly special. And I sensed that people were asking why. Why are we having so much success? And I thought it was important that we identify why for us to maintain that success. And so I started speaking on that book. But in 2009, Jim Collins came out with a follow-up book called How the Mighty Fall. And for me, so many books that are written corporately for corporations, I have a tendency to see how they apply to the individual. And I think this fits especially well with your podcast here as you talk about the CEO developing the individual. So again, so many are written, good to great companies, and here's what the corporation did. And I was like, okay, how does that come down to an individual level? And so his follow-up book in 2009 was titled How the Mighty Fall. And as he talked about how major corporations, very successful corporations fall, I could see the parallels of how individuals fall, how they have success in their life, and then they come to take it for granted. They come to put the profits before the people. And then, it's interesting, character, the more character a person has, that typically the more business they write, the more successful they get. But when they stop developing, they're recognizing the character piece, or they lose their humility. What do we learn from the ancient text? That pride goeth before the fall, right? And so next thing you know, they forget their why. And that's what that book was about. It was about the companies that forgot their why die. And what for me was that individuals who forget their why die. They die in spirit. They die in motivation. They die in inspiration, right? Maybe not physically. So I was like, okay, I don't want that to happen to my company. I don't want us to we've gone from good to great, and I don't want us to fall. And so how do I keep my company from falling? And I mean, big corporations and the CEO and a big, large corporation, especially if they're publicly traded and that kind of thing, they got their mind on what and how. They're all like what to do and how to do it, what to sell and how to sell it. Rarely are they asking why. And every business starts with a why. Every business serves, be it a product or a service. they're serving a customer, and the customer loves what they're getting, and therefore they get business. So they all start with a why, but at some point they can, it's people before profits early on, and then somewhere down the line that can get switched around anyway. So I created the Y Team Weekly back in 2009, just to keep my colleagues, those who were interested and so inspired. I didn't call up senior manager. I just took the initiative because I was like, hey, they got their job. Maybe I'll do the why thing in the field. They can do the what and how thing in the ivory tower, right? And so I started sending a weekly email, and it grew in membership. People would just hear about it. They'd come on board, and we just talk about why we're here and why do we matter beyond, features, benefits, and products and all this other stuff. And then about a little over 6 years ago, a friend of mine said, well, Steve, I know you're in this regulated industry and all, but you're not really talking about the stock market or anything like that. Why don't you make it a public blog? And it turns out even members of the compliance department were on the Y Team, and they were like, yeah, you got approval. You can do that if you want. And so I started writing a weekly blog. And it keeps me disciplined. Go back to that discipline. That's usually what I'm doing after my workouts is I'm writing these weekly blogs. And I've got, I collaborate with a woman, Ioana Sullivan's her name. I collaborate with, she speaks 5 languages. She's from Romania. And I was like, I could use a little help with my grammar. So I think it's kind of funny that I turned to somebody from Romania to help me with my English. but that's been collaborative because she's given me the female perspective. She's also got that sort of European perspective. And together it's been a fantastic journey. In fact, my 3rd book is going to be a publication of these blogs. Still working on how to organize that. My first book is Don't Believe Everything You Think, which is a parable. Worked with a professional writer. That was one of the most incredible creative experiences of my life. My second book is The Art of Why. So the parable sort of sets up the situation. It begs the question, why? And then The Art of Why was some specific answers or steps you can take. Both these books are available through Amazon. But the 3rd book I'm working on it right. Again, it's really written because it's these blogs. But the Y Team Weekly I like what you said about seed planting. We underestimate the power of that. We want the harvest so quickly, but if we have the discipline to hoe the rows and plant the seeds and then have faith, again, you can hear a bit of my spiritual approach, that God or the universe, however you want to define it, is going to provide the rain and the wind. There's an old saying, again, going back to the ancient text, that those who focus on the wind will not sow, and those who focus on the clouds will not reap. And I think that fits so beautifully in what we're dealing with today. I mean, there's always some sort of apocalypse du jour, some soup of the day, that apocalypse of the day that we can use as excuses not to answer the call, not to plant the seed, not to eventually harvest. But Y Team Weekly, I'm very proud of. I'm just grateful to be a part of it. And I'm telling you, sometimes I finish writing it and I know I didn't write it. I mean, it just comes together like, wow, it was so cool. And when that kind of thing is possible through you, I think you want to open up more to that and no matter where you find yourself in corporate America, whatever job you have, if you can be open to some sort of calling. And I got 3 kids, so I can run through walls for them. So that's another thing too, when you focus on the serving as opposed to, personal development. I'm a big fan of that, but that development comes from an idea that I want to be the best I can be for my children. So I know that was a long answer to a short question, but Y Team Weekly is my baby, and I am been privileged to give birth to it. And I'm excited because it's growing pretty fast. It's growing. Yeah. Cool.
I love it, man. So, you've expressed a few different topics right today, and really super appreciative that you would take the time and, you came off stage, we kind of connected, and like you said, the energy was kind of mutual, right? I felt it, and we exchanged numbers, and here we are. So, the entrepreneur spirit is something that, I think in the Go for CEO community, it truly is not just necessarily about being a CEO of a company, right? But the CEO of your life, right? And obviously, as a spiritual person, we know that there is a true CEO, right, of our life. But a lot of people don't own their life, and they feel like there's this struggle, right, between like, how do I take control? But I serve this and I serve that, right? I have 5 F's, right? Faith, family, fitness, finance, and fun. Those are the kind of 5 F's that we've established, and I borrowed it from someone else, right, and learned that from someone else. But my wife and I look at that and I go, okay, like this year, what kind of fun are we going to have? This year, what are some family events that we could do? This year, what kind of faith can we grow into? This year, where's our fitness, right? All that type of stuff. So it's really interesting that, if most people are in a corporate America or small business job as an employee, how can we take that CEO mindset, that why team weekly mindset, and implement it? And obviously most people have to want to do it, right? And have that desire, but it's really really cool. So thank you for sharing that, and we'll definitely obviously put the links to Why Team Weekly and Go for CEO community. Please subscribe to that. I mean, how cool would it be to be able to have a weekly message and just kind of start to build and harvest, right? They always say, what is it? An overnight success is about 20, 30, 40 years in the making.
Yeah, right.
So it's an incredible journey. But so look, we love to end our interviews with CEO, which is, it's a business scenario, but from building your Why Team Weekly internally to having vendors and people, and even the website that you run, all that type of stuff. There's people that you're always going to interact with, right? So the C is client experience, which could be your subscribers to Why Team Weekly, the things that you do, StephenLuckenbach.com, those types of things. E is for engagement. How do we engage with our vendors, with our suppliers, with people that we do business with clients, all that type of stuff, people that work with us or for us. And then O is for operations. So that's the CEO, client experience, engagement, and operations. So from a very high level, what would you say is kind of like a couple nuggets you could share with client experience, and how people, maybe a couple things that say, hey, when they register for Why Team Weekly, what's the experience they're going to get from that? Or how do you see that?
Excellent. Thank you. So what comes to mind when you share this is leaders go first. I just love that simple awareness that leaders go first. And you can only lead someone as far as you have gone yourself. Mm-hmm. And so there's that constant challenge to grow individually. And so going back to your point about ownership, a few things came to mind as you were finishing up. And I know you're asking for the high level here. I would say collaboration. It was Walt Disney. Walt Disney said that he probably would have ended up in jail if it weren't for his brother, Roy Disney. So Walt was that visionary, right? He was the one who saw the potential of cartoons and that kind of thing. But without a Roy, there wouldn't be a Disney World. And you'll find that a lot in corporate America. You'll see that there is that sort of the innovator on the front, the one with the ideas, the one that's pulling that stuff from their experiences. But you've got to, I think it's so important that you collaborate with other people that may be more analytical, more, that's just their strength, right? Those ones that enjoy the spreadsheet, or that's definitely not me. I would say that right at the top, that none of this would be possible if I hadn't collaborated with people. Like I knew that I'm really a professional speaker. That's really the skill set that I've developed over 20 years. But what's that mean from a writing standpoint? Now, the writing developed through the discipline of writing the blog. I remember when I first started writing the blog, a buddy of mine sent me a book on grammar and sentence construction, right? And I was like, okay, yeah, I just jumped in. He's like, hey, it's a good message. It's a little hard to read because the way you write. And so that's what when I ended up collaborating with Ioana, to sort of, hey, I need another set of eyes on this thing, right? And then I had another woman I was working with that was actually pulling the photos and posting. And so, that's really huge. What is my unique ability? Dan Sullivan's a coach out of Chicago, and he says, what is your unique ability? And it's that one thing that you cannot delegate. But if you can delegate everything else, do it. Yep. Really drilling in on what that is. I would say this extreme ownership idea too, from an entrepreneur standpoint, is that even though you have an employer, technically, You are the CEO, like you said, CEO of your life. How are you conducting your life? How are you feeding yourself spiritually and mentally? I love this faith, family, fitness, fun. By the way, that reminds me of the big rock concepts, that's really helped me as well too. You think about a container or a jar. 2023, good timing here for this, is essentially a container. You got to get the big rocks in first, right? If you allow it to get filled with pebbles, and you're not going to be able to get that big stuff in. And so that's been crucial too, is, it's a big rock that I stop and write at least once a week for a full hour after a workout. It's a big rock that I get in with family time and that kind of thing. Get those big rocks loaded, lay them out in the calendar. But I think essentially from a high level question, from a corporate standpoint, I think it's all about together we're better. It's about collaboration. Find somebody else who is interested in your mission, can come along, and then they bring something like a Roy Disney brought to Walt. That's probably my best advice there.
I love it. I love it. So, E is for engagement. So when you kind of parlay what you just shared from the client experience and kind of putting that all together, as far as engagement, why do you think people, I guess, engage with you? What would you say is a nugget that you've been able to develop of why to, and I'll give an example, right? This morning, I was waiting for the meeting that we had for breakfast. And instead of just sitting there doing nothing or being on BoobTube or something like that on social media, what I do is I take any free time and I'll text people, and I'll just look through my text or look through my contacts. And if I haven't seen that I've touched you in the last 3 months, I'll send, hey, I'm thinking about you. Hope all is well. Hope you're having a great 2023. And it's simple. So that helps. And I've learned that it helps other people to be like, oh, that guy was thinking about, oh, John, maybe I haven't thought about John in 6 months, but all of a sudden you just sent me a text, right? So what would you say is a way that people engage with you and why people want to engage with you?
Well, think about what motivates you to do that. You go through, you see their name. Okay, this goes back to why. I think engagement, depending on what your why is, right? If your why is to sell, engagement's going to diminish. I mean, you might have it high, but you're not going to, a lot of people want to engage with you if you're just out to get, right? But if you're serving, if you're into, it's like, hey, I know that texting this person I haven't talked to in a couple of months is probably going to lift them in some way. It's probably going to, hey, John, I haven't talked to you in a while. Hope you and the family are doing great. What a loving, giving, instead of you just flipping through Instagram, right? You go, again, that's a self-discipline of serving. Your why is to make the world a better place. My mother really entrenched that in me. Can you make every human, it's sort of a hobby or a goal is, can you make every human encounter, every person you encounter a little better for having encountered you, right? Just that smile to the cashier or whatever it may be. But I think the engagement, what's really crucial, of course, you'd expect me to say this is, from the why team and the why guys, so to speak, is it's about your why, right? Okay. If you're out for yourself, your success is going to be arm's length because it's about you. But when you're out to make a difference in the world, it's a limitless potential that comes from there. And so from an engagement side, I think people feel that from stage. When I get on stage, I sort of disappear and I'm gone, because in the early part of my career, I had to pay attention to how I presented. It's like playing a guitar. You got to pay attention to where your fingers are, but you're never going to play great music focusing on the strings. You got to focus on the people that you want to entertain and that you want to serve. And so from stage, I'm so full on passionate about helping people break through their boundaries. And I think that shows up in my writing as well. They can feel it. And they can also, it's not so this you thing, it's a we thing. We're all on this journey together. How can we become better? And I'll close with this line here. When you seek to light the path of another, you can't help but light your own path. When you seek to light the path of another, you can't help but light your own path. I just find that giving, loving, serving, even if your grammar's terrible, just get out there, because it's its own reward. It has a spirit. People know, they're reading and they're like, hey, he needs to work on his grammar, but and it's been cleaned up. But he's like, hey, this guy seems to really care about me. He really wants something from me. Yeah. And oh my gosh. And I I don't want to let my members down. I work really hard to put good content out there, but I'd say that the why is key to great engagement.
That's awesome. That's super fair, and really comes back to the grounding foundation of kind of how you've built your enterprise and your mindset. So last one is operations, right? And it gets a little technical, right? And operations just really like, you just said one operating rhythm that you have is after you work out, you take an hour, you write, and that contributes to your weekly blog. So what are some things that you would say that you've seen success in when you think about operations as an intrapreneur and the entrepreneurial side of what you do?
So I'll give you a quote that I think is rocket fuel. I'm known for saying that. I grew up in Huntsville, Alabama as a kid. So I was right there around the rockets, the first man on the moon and all of that. So I think it's absolute rocket fuel to have, I lost my train of thought. I started thinking about the rockets and the moon. So your question about operations, I think it's, so Voltaire said this is the rocket fuel quote. Voltaire said, perfect is the enemy of good. Perfect is the enemy of good. So many times I see people, they're not even good because they're trying to be perfect. They're not taking any positive action at all. I would say just jump in. But when I realized people were too busy to read my blog, I was like, man, I think they could benefit from an audio. It's like, I think they would listen. And I had some people say, hey, could you do an audio? I just grabbed my phone and recorded the audio. I just hit record. I know you've had your own journey here. And I was like, wait, there's a lot of background noise. And I literally put a blanket over my head. And that's how I recorded the audio. You just got to go. I would say just go, just jump in. We learn how to swim when we do that. And I think with a strong why to serve others. So I think solid operations develop out of the go. I mean, now I've got a more professional setup for my recordings, and I've got, that comes with time, but just get in there. We get so focused on the journey of 1,000 miles, we don't even take a step. So we just got to celebrate those individual steps. That I think develops operations. But again, get yourself a Roy Disney. Again, work in the systems. You want to accomplish anything, build a process for its accomplishment, not just wishful thinking, but okay, I'm going to do this on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I'm going to, and then get people that you can enter into accountability relationships. And then you'll find the technology. I mean, where there's a will, there's a way. I'm pretty excited about my third book. I'm starting to notice here, I'm just going to have to hire somebody to pull this thing together because I just, my own schedule. So again, you jump in, you're like, okay, I got to do something different or it's not going to manifest. Right. So I don't know. Hope that answers your question.
No, I love it. I love it. I mean, obviously we all know that acronym if you've kind of been around, right? System, right? Save yourself time, money, and energy, right? Or save yourself time, energy, and money. Sorry. But it's interesting, right? To just, operationally, I think you're so correct. And Go for CEO community, if you just listen to that last 45 seconds, right? If you've gotten anything out of this message, do something next. Don't worry about the perfect Excel spreadsheet or the whatever, you know where the box is going to go when you get that order from Amazon and, or Etsy or whatever you do, right? All that type of stuff. Just do it and then start to perfect those systems and processes. Well, yes. Steve, phenomenal time. Thank you so much for everything that you just shared with our community. We'd love to obviously make sure that people subscribe to, the yteamweekly.com, and then obviously steveluckenbach.com. So share with them just any other ways that you like to communicate with your audience or how people can book you possibly for speaking, all that type of stuff.
So if you're interested in booking, you go to the website, steveluckenbach.com. Last name is Luckenbach. And we can maybe even do something like a Zoom or a podcast, whatever you might like to do. But the Y Team Weekly is the way that I hope to serve the most in regular weekly engagement. And that's, you just go to yteamweekly.com, all written out, WHYTEAM weekly, WEEKLY.com. You just put in your first, last name and your email address. Doesn't cost anything other than a bit of your time, but hopefully you'll find that worth the investment. It would be a privilege and a pleasure to to share my journey and all that I'm seeking to learn. I have many coaches in my life. I'm constantly investing in myself. I started rock climbing in 2016, summited Kilimanjaro in 18. I climbed a glacier. And I'm not even an adrenaline junkie, but I knew there were things to be learned out in adventure that I couldn't learn any other way. And there's again, the calling to serve my members calls me to higher ground, literally. So, I would love to have you as a member if you're so inspired. And John, thank you for this opportunity to get a little fired up today on a Saturday. And I know we're recording this on a Saturday, and I love your insights too, man. I was taking a ton of notes, man. So I love what you've done here. Well done with your community. So thanks for letting me be a part of it.
No, likewise. And, at the Go for CEO community, it's sometimes a struggle, but we fight to get you back on 6, 12, 18 months later, because we want to build a tribe around, people knowing who Steve Luckenbach is, obviously already the accolades that you've produced in your life and all that stuff. So thanks so much, Steve, and Go for CEO community. By the way, if you aren't a subscriber, I always try to get this part in, right? Become a subscriber of the YouTube channel. Help me to grow this community. We've been on the YouTube active for the last couple of years. We've brought you over 100 plus videos of CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs, and it's not the biggest names in the world, right? But it's the people that are making true impacts in communities around the world. We've had people from Ireland, from Australia, from the United States, from many different walks of life. And as you heard Steve today, what an incredible vision to be an intrapreneur inside of an entrepreneur.